South will represent with your colors. You've been forgiven.
Well, I want to welcome all of you again to God Among the Gangs. And I just want to say that since we launched this, I think it was 4 weeks ago, it's been just completely incredible. And just for me personally, to be able to share the things that some of them that I've never shared before, or maybe shared in pieces here and there, but I've never actually put all of this together. And that's one of the reasons why I'm calling it, now it can be told, because I feel like I can actually go back and revisit some of the great things God did. Some of them just to encourage you, some of them to help those of you that are maybe involved in gangs or maybe know someone that's a gang member, or just wanting to be preventive with your own children or kids that you're ministering to or whatever it might be. But it's been a great blessing to me. And this segment, these last few episodes, we've been calling them gangster war stories. And so I began kind of telling the story of how I converted and how I believed that God called me into gang ministry. We brought my wife in. I think that episode was just amazing, hearing her perspective. It was so difficult for her, doing gang outreach. Many times your day starts like at 10 p.m. at night. And many times I'd be back, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. And a lot of women, that have husbands are like, how do you allow that? Like, what is that? Crazy. And it was simply because she understood the calling that was upon my life. She knew that I was doing God's work. Thank God my wife is not a jealous woman. It'd be very difficult to do a ministry like this, or actually any ministry, with a wife that's constantly, watching over you and just, jealous all the time. She was very secure in herself, is very secure in herself. She has every right to be secure in herself because she's a beautiful woman. But the most important thing is that she believed and believes in God's calling upon my life, especially to rescue young people in gangs. And to hear her perspective of how she dealt with that and how that affected our home life and even the raising of our children, I think was just so valuable for any woman that is married to a man in ministry, or any woman doing ministry like my wife is, who's been doing ministry since the very beginning with me. I think it's just so valuable, the things that she talked about. We got into, how we opened up the gang church and, my meeting with Pastor Alberto Delgado, my pastor who I'm under his covering, and right now working with him as the executive pastor of the church of Alpha and Omega. And how we met was just a miracle. I know Pastor very well. One of the reasons why I took on this position as executive pastor is because I know how he thinks. I know how he likes to do ministry. And one of the things I know about my pastor is that he really thinks things through. And before he makes a move, he really, really, really waits and prays about it. And sometimes, I think he's too patient for me, because I can be a little impatient. And sometimes I'll be like, Pastor, so what are we going to do? What are we going to do? But he's waiting. He's being patient. I remember one of the presidents said that whenever, he had tough decisions to make, that he would always take a jog around the block 2 or 3 times. And then he would think about it, because he said that once he released all that energy, he was able to think a little bit better and not be so emotional. I think that's Pastor. But the way that I came on him is just came on board with him is completely uncharacteristic for anyone that knows my pastor. I sat there in his office, as I told you guys already, and he said, let's open a gang church. And I had never heard of this. In fact, I looked it up, and it's never been done before, and that I'm aware of, it's never been done again. And I was like, great idea, let's do it. So when? He's like, now. I'm like, what do you mean now? He goes, I'm hiring you right now. You're on my staff. Go find a building. I was like, what? And listen, I was just meeting him at the time. That was really my first real one-on-one meeting with him. And I thought he was just very spontaneous person. And through the years, I've realized that was like a one-off. He does not do that. This is not the way he does ministry. I just think it was something so powerful, a connection that was so strong at the moment, that he was like, we got to do this. Like, we got to do this, and we got to do it right now. And so I honor him for that, because he was obedient to the voice of God. And he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to take a chance on me. He didn't really know who I was. And he did it. And let me tell you something that I'm aware of. He's never done it before. And he's never done it again that I'm aware of. So that's how we started the gang church. We went to a couple of episodes where you guys heard the testimony from my good friend Laz. Laz is just an amazing man of God. We're talking about how he's become successful so many times, and then because of drugs and alcohol, he's lost it all quite a few times. And we talked about that taxi police car chase, high-speed chase, probably one of the most famous high-speed chases, not only in the city of Miami, but maybe across the country. For over an hour, helicopters and on live TV were showing this taxi zooming in and out of traffic. I didn't know it was him, and I knew him very well at the time. Of course, I didn't know it was him. I'm just watching a car chase, a police high-speed chase. And I know I was thinking one thing, that dude can drive. I was like, because he would avoid accidents. It was incredible. I was like, that man can drive. That man ought to be, a NASCAR race driver. I mean, that guy needs to do this professionally. And I even watched when he finally, I think it was that he ran out of gas and ran out of the car, and they tased him and dropped him. And I still didn't recognize that it was him because from the helicopter, you couldn't tell. And then, of course, he gets locked up in prison or in jail, and he's reaching out because that's what they all do. They call me when they get locked up. And Pastor Forte, I need you to come visit me. I ran away from the Lord. I've been backslidden or whatnot. And so, I went over there. I visited him. And God began to do something during that time. God began to work with him. And God did just great miracles. You heard his story. It's amazing. It's a gangster war story, like maybe very few others. Then I interviewed my friend Miguel Snoopy Mendez, an incredible story, sent from California as a missionary, that's what they call them, to start a chapter here in Miami of his gang in Los Angeles County, in Orange County. And so he comes here and begins his gang, super successful. By the time I meet him, he's running close to 200 guys and 200 people because he had girls. He had actually quite a few girls that were part of the gang. The culture that he brought to Miami was totally different than what the Miami gangsters were used to because, we were part of the Chicago culture, but he brought the California. He might have been one of the first ones, if not the first, to bring the California style culture to Miami, which wasn't so much gangsterism. And I'm going to explain what that means. They were more about family. It was really hardcore. This is your family. The Chicago style is more gangster. It's more about drug dealing. Yes, they teach you lessons. Yes, they brainwash you so that you don't jump from gang to gang. I'm not saying they don't. But that culture of family, that culture of, we love each other and we're supporting and very racial at the same time, very Latino. He brought that to Miami, and the kids started buying into it when I finally met him. And you guys heard the story. It was late at night. My board of the church that I was pastoring was like, you can't go in there. My wife was like, you can't go in there. And everybody was like, you can't go. It's 2:00 in the morning meeting. This is a setup. Definitely they're trying to kill you. And I just felt, and listen, I'm not nobody special, but when I know God speaks to me, I'm going to obey no matter what. And I knew God was calling me to go there. I knew something was going to happen. I knew it was a setup, but I knew God's power at the same time. And I said, I'm going to walk into this and I'm going to see what God does from here. And listen, years later, what God did that day was probably one of the best decisions I ever made in my Christian ministry life. Because Miguel Snoopy Mendez came to the Lord. He's been such an impact to so many people, both him and Laz. Laz has a ministry called Addicted to God Ministries. He is rescuing people from the streets out in the area of Ocala. He moved over there. He has a home over there. His house is constantly packed with the people that nobody wants, the people that drug programs, that homeless shelters won't accept. That's who he's taking in there. The ones that have been kicked out of drug programs. The other day, there was a young man here, 16, 17 years old, homeless. His family, if I'm correct, and Laz can correct me on this if I'm wrong, his family was deported. He wasn't home when it happened, so he ends up totally in the streets, nowhere to go, no family, everybody's deported. And they call me and tell me this kid that needs help, midnight on a Saturday night. And I'm like, what do I do with this guy? You know what I'm saying? He's homeless. I'm asking around who can take this kid in. Everybody's like, if he's a minor, he needs to have consent from his family. We can't just bring in a minor into our home. Plus he's he doesn't have his paperwork. We can't do anything. We can't help him. And I thought about Laz. And I said, man, if somebody could do something with this kid, Laz can do something. And Laz said, listen, I'll be there tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning from Ocala. I'm picking him up. He goes, we're doing everything right. He goes, I'm getting legal custody of him. That's the first thing I'm going to do. He goes, I'm going to start his path to finding a way for him to get a residency here. I'm enrolling him in school. I'm going to do all of these things the proper way. He goes, I'm going through ORR, if you know who they are. He did all of this. He has legal custody of this child. No one else could help this kid except Laz that I know of. The person I called to take care of this problem is one of the guys that was rescued from this gang ministry. This is what God does. This is the people that God uses. People that have a heart for people. People that have been, Laz has been homeless I don't know how many times. He's been in the border of dying, of a coma, from drinking and smoking and just trying to kill himself, literally trying to kill himself to death through drugs. And so you call a person like that when you have a problem like this one, and they're the ones that are going to say, you know what, let's get this done. He drove over here and got him and took him back with him. And this is not the only story. I'm going to be interviewing a friend of ours named Kairos at some point. He's with them over there in Ocala. I just need him here in Miami so we can do this recording. One of the most incredible stories I ever met in my life. And one of the hardest people to reach that I've ever dealt with in my life. You want to talk about being a tough person with a strong attitude? That would be Kairos. Well, guess where Kairos is at? He's with Laz right now. He's helping Laz. He's been there for almost 2 months, got his life, getting his life in order. I mean, this is a tool in God's hands. I can't wait to interview Kairos so that you can listen. Miguel is getting ready to make a trip. Miguel Snoopy is getting ready to do a trip to Cuba. He's got a bunch of brand new shoes. He's taking everything over there. He's got a ministry called Second Chance. And he's been doing Second Chance that I'm aware of probably close to 15 years now. They go here in Miami, but they also go out of the country. They bless kids in the poorest parts of this hemisphere, in some of the worst areas. And he just does actions of love for these kids and changes their lives. God is good. God is good. But anyways, I want to continue because the last thing I told you was, we were able to open up the gang church, and Pastor Delgado told me, go find a place, and I did. I got right on that, and I found this warehouse in the middle of Alapata, and we did, we really fixed this place up. It looked gangster. It was, we got some of the best graffiti artists in Dade County, and they did these huge pieces across from one side to the other, just huge pieces of Jesus, said Jesus disciples on there. And we brought pool tables in there. We had food on the grill 24/7. We tried to be open 24 hours a day. A lot of people criticized that, how can you be open, at 2:00 in the morning on a Tuesday? These kids need to go to school. I was like, these kids don't go to school. Like, its bottom line is they don't go to school. They're not in school. And that's when they're committing crimes, 2:00 in the morning, 3:00 in the morning. So we're going to be open. We're going to be a place that they can come to when they're feeling that they need to commit a crime. If they want to talk to somebody first, we want to be able to pray for them. If they're hungry, We want to provide food for them. We had hot dogs constantly going. We had a tattoo artist in there that was transferring their gang tattoos and changing them up so that it wasn't a gang tattoo anymore. We had all this stuff going. With Maria, we talked about our first day when they showed up there with guns, to kill us, because I actually opened up this center in rival territory, which again is totally crazy. We had a whole bunch of kids in Hialeah. We had kids in Opelika. We had kids in Little Havana. I was straight with all those people. Alapata, no, we were not tight. And yet this is where we found the warehouse. This is where we got the right deal. And I asked God, I said, God, I'm in the wrong place. We don't have kids here. Like, this is not the area that I've been working, because up until that point, I was working with the kids we knew, the kids that maybe even knew me from my past. People that were easier to reach because they knew that I was one of the homies. And I asked God, and God said, listen, even your enemies will be at peace with you. And I was like, okay, let's do it. The first day didn't point like if that was going to be happening. The first day was chaos. Literally, my wife was like, this is your ministry. The kids and I are going to Alpha and Omega. That's our church. This is your church. You're the pastor. You do what you got to do. I'll support you, by praying for you and by, not hindering you and not bothering you. Understanding the hours that you work are very unconventional. But this, the kids can't come here no more, My youngest was literally in her arms. He couldn't even walk at the time. So we started, and things started happening. We had a basketball hoop that was outside, and we could play half court on it. And I'll never forget, I was playing basketball, and it was just three of us. We're playing hustle, and we're playing. The other two guys were really big guys, really tall. Probably 6'3" to 6'5", very good basketball players. And all of a sudden, down the street, I see this guy walking, and he comes up to us. He's got beads everywhere, and they are yellow and black. And I know who he is, which I know who he represents, better said. I know that he's from the same group that was enemies with me, big time. And he goes, hey, can I play some ball? And I was like, yeah, of course. I said, let's play some basketball. I said, let's play you and me against them two. Mind you, this guy is about my size. He actually looks a lot like me. People always confuse us, if they don't know us that well. They're like, are you him or are you? And I thought he probably could play basketball because, he came up and said, let's shoot some hoop. But the guy was terrible. Literally, the guy did not play basketball. He was a fighter, not a baller. And so we're playing on the same team. And this dude is fouling me. My own player is fouling me. Every time I go for a thing, he hits me with his forearm. He's knocking me on the ground. He's undercutting me. And I'm just like, this dude is crazy. Like, and we're winning. I don't miss a shot. I'm on my A game. We beat these guys 3 games in a row. This dude trying to kill me on my own team, and we're still winning. And we beat these guys that were really good, like I was saying. Really big, tall guys. They could dunk on 10 feet like nothing, on 10 feet rims. I mean, these guys were great. And here we are winning. There's no doubt that when you play with somebody, a sport, and you partner with them and they're a team, you bond. And there's a bonding that happens when you win together. Everybody knows. If you played any sports, if your team has been successful, there's a bond that is formed with the teammates. And a lot of people talk about this, younger people that won a state championship, that won regionals together. There's usually a very long-lasting bond between people that won. And this was not at that level. For example, this was 3 games, but we weren't supposed to win. And especially wasn't supposed to win when my own guy is trying to hurt me. But a little connection happened there. And so it was over, and I was like, man, why don't you come to church tonight? We're going to have a service, And he was like, I'll be here. And he came, and I was surprised. Very respectful, didn't give us any trouble. I met in the meantime, I started meeting his kids. He had a whole bunch of kids. I met his wife, who had a whole bunch of other kids from previous marriages. They had, I don't know, not to exaggerate, 10, 11, maybe even 12 kids. The guy couldn't be more than 27, 28 years old, you know? He had maximum of 12, minimum of 10 between the both of them. And I met his kids, you know, he wouldn't miss a service, you know? He would always be there, never received Christ. And I asked him why. He's like, you know, we have our own religion, man. You know, I can't receive Christ, you know? He goes, but I like what you're talking about, so I'm coming. I didn't know that he was undercover. Undercover, sent by this gang to assassinate me. And he was there to find out what we were doing, how we were doing it, and whether I was really a pastor or faking to recruit kids in that neighborhood to the gang that I was with. Through the time, I would say a good 3 to 4 months, he saw that we were the real deal. He knew that I was not trying to recruit anybody to other gangs. And so he had a date where he had to eliminate me. In other words, kill me. So he kept coming, never missed meetings, never received Christ. And the day that he had to do what he had to do, he asked to see me in private in the morning. I have a big thing I got to talk to you about. And I told him, I'll see you in the morning in the office. Nobody's going to be there early in the morning. Let's talk there alone, you and I. He showed up. And he says, Pastor Mario, today I have to do something that God will never forgive me for. He says, the time I've been here, I believe in God. I've come to believe in God. And I'm so ashamed because what I need to do is unforgivable. And I told him like a dummy. I didn't know he was talking about killing me. So I told him and said, listen, bro, God can forgive anything. It's not the best thing to say, right? God can forgive anything. Don't tell me that there's certain things that God can't forgive, because God can forgive anything. And he was like, you don't understand, Pastor Mark. You don't understand. What I got to do, God will not forgive me. He says, but if I don't do it, they're going to kill all of my kids. They're going to kill my wife. And they're going to spare me so that I see what they did to my family. And I have a decision to make. He goes, I either let my wife and family die or I do this other thing. And I kind of started picking up on what he was. I'm like, is this dude telling me that he's got to kill me? And I felt the Holy Ghost there. I felt the power of God there. And all of a sudden I said, listen, man, you have a gun, put it on the table. And he pulled out the gun and he put it on the table. I said, listen, you are not going to kill me today. And your family is not going to die. You're not going to die, and your wife is not going to die. And he goes, how do you know that? I said, because whoever sent you, you're going back to them, and you're going to tell them that I'm a man of God. And you're going to tell them that now you're a man of God, and that you couldn't kill me. And just like you couldn't kill me, they're not going to be able to kill you. He looked at me like, this dude is crazy. Listen, do your research on Google or Yahoo or whatever you use to explore the internet, and check how these Chicago gangs run. And you're going to see that some of these gangs, the gang leader literally sits on thrones of gold with assassins everywhere. You do not get meetings with them. When you go in there, imagine that you're back in the years when kings, I'm talking about during the Dark Ages, and when you went before a king, you were 1 second away from saying the wrong thing and having your head chopped off. That's exactly how you speak to these people. That's how you go in front of them. And I knew this. I know this for a fact. And I knew the gang that he belonged to, that they're the ones that takes us to another level. Whatever I'm telling you, they take it to the next level. And I said, you're going to go in there and you're going to tell them But first, you're going to pray with me right now, and you're going to receive Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And the God that you serve, the Inca God is what they called him. I said, that God is a false God. And that's why you couldn't kill me. And that's why they're not going to be able to kill you. And he prayed with me and he received Jesus. And he says, I'm going back to Chicago, Pastor. And I'm going to tell them and I'm going to believe that what you said is true. He went over there, stood before the Inca. That's what they call him. And by the way, he's God, just so that you understand. That's who they worship. That's who they serve, the leader of this gang. And he said, I couldn't kill him. What? I couldn't do it. Why? Because he's a man of God. He's truly had a conversion with Jesus Christ. And when I went to go do it, the power of God fell on me and I received Jesus as my Lord and Savior. I'm coming to tears, man. The king was furious. And he said, get this man out of my presence. Instead of killing him, they let him go. He came back to me. He says, Pastor Forte, I don't know how they didn't kill me right there. He said, but they're coming for my family. I said, they're not coming for your family. I said, they're not going to do anything to you because God is with us. And the next thing you know, another dude shows up. And he comes, same thing. Starts attending. I can't receive Jesus. You know, I have my own God. The other one's telling me, he's an assassin, bro. I know it. I know they sent him for both of us. I said, yeah, but I'm ready for it this time. We got this kid. I was just talking to Sister Lourdes Nunez, one of our volunteers. We had lunch with her recently. She took this kid to get his GED during that 3-4 point of time where they were wanting him to find out what was going on with me and the other guy. And during that time, he got his GED. During that time, he met one of our girls, fell in love with her. I did personally their wedding. I married them. Here he is now with a GED. Here he is now married to one of our ex-gang leader girls that he ended up marrying her. And the day comes. Pastor Forte, I need to talk to you. Okay, I'll see you in the morning, bro. I'll see you in the office. He comes in, he goes, Pastor Forte, I have to do something today that God will not forgive me for. And I said, there's some things that God will never forgive. That's called growth. That's called wisdom. I said, listen, man, don't mess with God. There's some things that he will not forgive. And after we went back and forth for a few minutes, I said, listen, bro, I know what's going on. Just put the gun down. You're not going to kill me. You're not going to kill the other one. You're not going to kill any of us. You're going to receive Jesus Christ with me right now as Lord and Savior. You're going to go back to the king like the other one did. You're going to tell him that I'm legit, that the other guy's legit, that now you are also legit, and that they're not going to be able to kill you or kill your family or do anything to you guys, because the same power of God that is protecting me, that protected the other dude, now is going to be protecting you. Put your gun down. He received Jesus with me. I said, now go back and tell the king what happened. He went back. King said, get this guy out of my presence and don't send anyone else to that church, because everybody that goes to the church ends up receiving Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Here we go. I'm like, we're in this territory of this gang. 2 of them have converted with us, doing very well, but they don't have the go-ahead to come to the church. In fact, they've been told to stay away from the church. So I said, I know what I'm going to do, because the leader gets locked up. I'm talking about locked up. You know, some people get locked up. Some people get locked up. This dude goes to Supermax. If you've ever heard of that, this is where you're not allowed contact with human beings ever again. The only person you have contact with is your lawyer, and you're taken out in cages, 50 yards apart from one another to see sunlight once a week. And I said, you know what? I got to try to reach this dude. because I need permission from him to get the kids in. So next thing I know, I'm getting a letter from him. A letter that was given to me because he gave it to his lawyer, gave it to somebody else. And this letter says, I want you to stay away from my kids. He goes, the only thing I want is I don't want you preaching to them and you'll be safe. He says, I know where your wife works. And he said where my wife worked. I know where your kids go to school. He put the schools that my kids went to. You are being watched. We know every step you take. Stay away from the kids. That's all I want. Keep those two. Don't touch anymore. I said, wow, man. Let me tell you something. As a father, I didn't even share this with I didn't share this with my wife for years. I didn't want to freak her out, spook her. You know? I just, I knew it wasn't the right time to tell her that, because she had never given me any trouble about what I was doing. She supported me 100%, but I think that letter might have been enough for her to say, hey, that's it. We're playing with our kids' lives. We're playing, you got to stop this, And so I didn't even tell her. And I'm not saying that she would have. I didn't even want to take that chance. And so I said, I'm going to write him a letter. I sent him 14 pages telling him how I converted, everything God did for me. 14 pages, handwritten. He wrote back and said, listen, I have mad respect for you. I don't want trouble. All I'm asking is for you to not try, I'm not going to mess with you. I'm not going to touch your children or anybody else that's connected to the Jesus disciples. He said, but leave my kids alone. I'll leave you alone. It's just fair, I wrote him back and I said, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to preach Jesus to every one of your kids. And I'm never going to stop preaching Jesus. And I'm never going to stop preaching Jesus to you. And I'm not going to stop till you give your life to Jesus. And he wrote back almost begging me, please leave my kids alone. Please don't preach Jesus to them. Please don't write me any more of these letters. It's like he didn't want to hear from me and I sensed that God was doing something. And I wrote him a third letter. And the next letter I get from him is I threw myself on my knees and I gave my life to Jesus Christ. And he said, and I opened the doors for every single kid in Miami to attend your church. And I want to tell you, from that point on, we were packed. I'm talking about hundreds of kids started coming from that gang. They were released to come. What God did from that point on is just incredible. Not only did they come, but they accepted for the other gang members to come, their rival gang members. We decided to call church God's turf, God's neutral territory, where no beef was allowed from by one gang to the other. These kids would kill each other, fight, do whatever it was anywhere else. But once they were in our hood, once they were in our church, in Jesus' disciples, they would respect each other. They learned to respect each other. They learned to start to like each other. The gang members that were enemies realized they had so much in common in church with some other gang members. They realized that some of them were Cuban and the other one was Cuban. This one's Honduran. The other ones, they're rival gangs and they're Honduran against Honduran, Mexican against Mexican, Cuban against Cuban. What are we doing? I started dropping knowledge on them. We're just killing ourselves. I go, the people that hate us, this is exactly what they want. They want Latinos killing Latinos. They want blacks killing blacks. We're doing their job. And it started filtering into them. And peace treaties started being signed by gangs that had been at wars for years. Gang leaders started accepting, other gang leaders started accepting that kids could get walked out of the gang without being killed. Some of them accepted them to be walked out through a beat down. And we would go. Actually, we would go. Miguel, Snoopy went with me on a lot of these because I really respected him as a gang leader. And as an older, he was a little older than the people. And I knew that he was a very, very patient man and with a lot of ethics. And so he went with me quite a few times where we'd watch the beat down and we would signal when to stop. When we saw that the kid was close to dying, we would tell him, that's enough. The kid is out. Now he can be a Jesus disciple. And the leaders were accepting that. Leaders were converting with us. God started moving in ways that I could never have ever imagined would happen. Gang violence started going down. We had had 16 or 17 homicides in the area where a gang church was at. The next year, it was 1. And the year after that, it was 0. We had had 100,000 car thefts. It went down to about 4,000. We had violent crime drop by 90% in that little area, one of the highest crime-ridden areas of Miami. All of a sudden, it was one of the safest places in Miami where it was not happening, where nothing was happening, because they were all with us. They were all hanging out with us. They were spending the nights with us. They were eating with us. They were breaking bread with us. They were learning about Jesus with us. They were recruiting other gangsters with us. And all of a sudden, crime in the city of Miami started to drop, where I want to say was probably one of the biggest turnarounds in the history of the United States of America. Listen, if you watch videos or documentaries about what Miami was like in the 80s and all the way to the end of the 90s, we were the most dangerous city in the world. And something happened. Very little people can explain what happened when all of a sudden 2000, 2001, 2002 hit and the numbers were drastically changed. No one really knows what happened. I know what happened. Revival broke out among the gangsters. Revival broke out among the gangsters, and they started coming to Jesus. They started getting saved. They started dropping their guns and taking up Bibles. Let me tell you something. What God did was simply amazing. And we said, we got to take this to the next level. We gotta do more. And the Jesus Disciples rap ministry was birthed. And it was birthed before that, because one of my disciples, Chris, we call him respectfully Tank, one of the best rappers I've ever met in my life, a musical genius, with lyrical genius. Let's put it that way. Lyrical genius, one of the best lyricists. I think that anybody that knows him would agree, one of the best lyricists of our times, you know? Really, it's unfortunate that that his music didn't reach more people, although it did reach a lot of people. But like every person into hip hop, I don't care where you live, you should know Tank. Like that's what I'm trying to say. Like Tank should be a household name in the rap industry. And unfortunately, is that's not the case. But a lot of underground, a lot of things, that only some people get to become familiar with. Unfortunately, with some great legends like him. But we started the rap group, and we started. I'm going to get into some of that in just a moment. But we started to have this incredible breakthrough with this gang. And before I get into what happened with the rap, I got to tell you this part. So the police, the Miami gang unit at the time, if you're out there and you're listening, you're one of the Miami gang units from the 90s, you guys sucked. Let me just tell you that. You guys were terrible. You did a horrible job, and that's why none of you are probably employed anymore in policing, and the gang unit was not successful.
Red is the blood that covers me in the night. Time of Armageddon, we find peace in the light. On the golden street, we have eternal light. Even in death, JD shine bright. Words from the Bible, techniques of survival. For the present day, Jesus, disciple, represent with your colors. You've been forgiven.